The wind scraped at the stone with a sound like a knife being drawn across bone. It had a way of finding every seam and ill-fitting shutter in the gates of the moon, and worrying at it until the whole keep murmured. Elaine stood with her hands on the window latch, feeling the draft thread through her fingers, and watched the blue morning come down the giant's lance. The mountains were knives too, 1,000 of them rising in layered ranks, edges dulled by distance, and the milk-white curtains of cloud that trailed from the peaks. The eyrie itself was only a pale scar on the height above, winking faintly as the sun crested the shoulders of stone. Bells were ringing already. Low. Not the bright bronze of a feast day, but the measured chime of summons. Somewhere in the yard below, stable boys cursed at stubborn mules, and a groom shouted for a better hand on a restive palfrey. Lords were arriving. She drew the shutter closed and turned. The solar was cold despite the brazier, but it was tidy. She had ordered it so. The carpets clipped, the ashes taken, the table scrubbed with brine until the oak smelled sharpened salt, the ledgers stacked with Petyr's neat hands upon them like a pair of gray cats asleep. The sound of the bells threaded through the door, through the stone, the brass latch, the seam of the threshold, and came to rest somewhere in her spine. Summons. The Lords Declarant had never had that name from their own lips in the hearing of commoners, but men whispered it, and Elaine had come to think of them in that way. Bronzion Royce and his like, grave as standing stones. It was said they would sit today in judgment. It was said they would call it a trial. When Petyr came in, he brought the smell of outside on his cloak. Frost and horses, the sour breath of harness leather. He closed the door behind him as if it were a secret he intended to keep, and smiled at her. He was always short for a lord, always slight, yet he filled space. "You have the room warm," he said, glancing at the brazier. "It is warmer than the yard," she said. "There are 3 more households at the gate. The hunters from Longbow Hall first, on the fox-red horses, and then Lords Belmore and Redford. The Redford banner has a tear in it where the edge frayed. I could see light through it. Then shall you watch everything." He hung his cloak and went to the table with the ledgers. If only the Lords of the Vale did as much. Elaine lowered her eyes, as was proper for a bastard in a lord's service. "Will it be here? I heard Sir Nestor's men speaking, and they think Lord Royce wants it under the eyes." "Under the eyes," Petyr said, a laugh suppressed within the words. If the carved faces of dead trees make truth more truthful." He flicked open a ledger and ran one finger down columns of numbers that made sense to him the way a song might to a singer. "No. Bronzion may fancy the gods would, but the high hall is ours. Sir Nestor requires it, the moon's pale face and all that. The Vale loves its little plays." She folded her hands to keep them from trembling. Plays. The word made her think of the singer in the dungeon. Marillion's voice had been the Vale's play for a while, when he sang under a clean sky and drew girls with his pretty mouth and men with his pretty lies. Now his voice was a raw croak, and his eyes were always wet. She wished she had never liked the sound of a harp. "Do they call it a trial?" she asked. "They call it a hearing," Petyr said lightly. "They will dress it in all their old silks and bronze, call it lordly judgment, call it the right of the Vale. The words change nothing. Men come to see a man they have decided to hate, and the man decides what to give them to carry home. Bread or blood, truth or a show." He glanced up at her then, and in his pale gray-green eyes she saw the mirror of herself. A dark girl with dark hair, plain dress, a bastard's quiet. "You look afraid." "I look as I feel," she said, grateful for the brazier's heat. "Feeling none of it." "Fear is good," Petyr said. "Keeps the wits sharp." "I like you sharp, Elaine." He set the ledger aside and crossed to her, laid his fingertips lightly over her knuckles where they worried at themselves. "We will be very dull if we tell them only truth. Lies make men wake up. Lies and coin, and a little spectacle. I have arranged all 3. No." Sir Lotor Brune was at the door then, clearing his throat in the way of a man who knew better than to step into a lord's private words. Petyr did not remove his fingers from Elaine's hands as he called, "Enter." She felt the weight of those fingertips like a ring forged cold and fitted to her bones. "Lord Belmore and Lord Redford are within," Lothar said. "Bronze Yon's not come yet, but the hunters are here, and Lord Templeton. Sir Nestor asks if you would receive them in the Great Hall, or if we'll keep them waiting under arms." "Ben, we'll keep nothing waiting under arms," Petyr said. "We'll give the Vale all courtesy today. Keep them in the Great Hall with hot wine and peel the chill off them." "Miranda must be told to flutter." Lothar raised an eyebrow. Petyr smiled. "Ah, you do not like fluttering." "Neither do I. But the lords do." "I'll tell the girl," Lothar said, dry as old bread. "Wait," Petyr said. "Send for Sir Lyn Corbray as well. He must be seen where he chooses to be seen, and today, I choose him." Then, when Lothar withdrew, the murmuring of the wind returned to the room. Petyr did not move his fingers from Elena's hands. He only bent his head the smallest bit. "You will sit to the left of the high chair," he said. "You will look grave but warm. You will look as if you love me." She nodded. That was easy enough. He had taught her so much of the part she wore that sometimes she thought there had been no true girl beneath it. Only a hollow shape waiting to be filled. There was truth and affection and falsehood in it. And the two wore each other's faces so easily here. But the lords were arriving, and she had no hunger for the dungeon. Petyr left her to fetch his cloak and the mockingbird pin. It had been polished to a sheen that took what little sun the room allowed and poured it outward, a drop of brightness on dull stone. He fastened it at his throat with fingers as deft as a woman's. "Smile," he said. She did. The great hall of the Gates of the Moon could not decide whether to be castle or inn when it was crowded. Servants with steaming jugs moved between benches laden with platters, and at the far end, the dais glowed with candles and polished cups. The banners hung from rafters so high they made her neck ache to stare. The winged knight of Erin, the bronze and iron runes of House Royce, the peacock bright of Belmore, the red talons of Templeton, the red fort upon Grey. Men spoke in low voices. Men laughed too loudly, and more than one woman there wore her hair unbound beneath a fur-lined hood, as if the very wind might appreciate its color. Miranda Royce, in a gown the blue of lake water and a collar of little lapis beads, did her fluttering to perfection. She made a curtsy with a tilt of chin that turned a courtesy into a jest, and tugged at the corners of even stiff mouths. "My father said I must be a hostess," she told Elaine under the murmur, "which means a warm smile and cold fingers. If I touch Lord Belmore's hand once more to lead him anywhere, I shall chip off a knuckle." "You do well," Elaine said, and Miranda's bright eyes darted toward Petyr, then back. "He has his bird shined," Randa whispered. "Always a good sign. Are they to put him in a sky cell?" "Damn?" Elaine felt the blood climb her throat like a vine. "They will put no lord in a sky cell," she said, and heard how thin the words were. "They put handsome men in them sometimes," Miranda mused. To improve the view, Lord Belmore was there to scowl at them, Lord Redford to say precisely what honor demanded, and not one word more, and behind them the men of Longbow Hall, who wore leather as if it were their skin. And then the room shifted, for Bronze Jan Royce had come into it. He did not stride so much as plant his feet and allow the room to move around him. His cloak was wool plain enough to clothe a shepherd, but his brooch was a circle of old bronze filled with runes that curled like trapped smoke. He had a beard of iron filings and eyes the color of a frost-bleached sky. The hush that accompanied him was not reverence and not fear precisely, but it was kin to both. "Lord Protector," he said to Petyr with no quiver at any corner of his mouth, "the winter paths were kind enough to me today. Will they be kind enough to truth?" "Then sir." "If truth owns a good mule, my lord," Petyr replied with warmth and grace, and an upward flicker of lashes, "it can be hauled anywhere. Will you take mulled wine? I am told the Gates of the Moon pour generously." There were words then, like stone blocks being shifted by men who had moved stone blocks enough to know where to set their hands. Formal greetings, bows against obligation, cups tilted to the absent Lord Robert Arryn and to the shade of his lady mother. Bronze Yon's gaze slid over Elaine and lodged nowhere. Other eyes were less careful. Sir Lyn Corbray's eyes, most of all. He wore Lady Forlorn for the look of the thing, though his sword was piece-tied by a strip of blue silk that matched nothing else he wore. He had a beauty with edges on it, and a laugh that came from too far back in his throat. He let his glance cross a lane the way one lets a dagger rest on a table, not threatening now but there to be seen. "Sir Lin," Petyr said, and that warm voice took on another kind of warmth, something like the heat of a pocket where one keeps a coin. "You come as you promised." "I promised to come." "Then here I am," Sir Lin said with an innocence that a child would have been ashamed to counterfeit. "I've come to see justice done, Littlefinger." "Then we are brothers in piety," Petyr said. "Shall we sit and pray together for it?" He gestured to the dais, a small, graceful throwing of the hand, and suddenly all the room was motion. Men moving to places appointed them, Miranda steering Lord Belmore's cold knuckles, Lothar Brune standing like a pillar where a pillar would have done no better. Servants easing the weight of viewers onto tables with the skill of men who had poured wine and listened to matters of life and death, holdings and hangings, their entire life. The maester had flown his ravens early, and with them, word had flown before the lords themselves. The high hall had seen it since dawn. Washerwomen tugging as one on sheets. Sir Nestor's steward checking the dais thrice. The old knight who had once held the bloody gate chewing thoughtfully on his beard as he tested the edge of his honor on the shape of the day. When at last Lord Nestor himself called that all were present who would be heard, the candles swayed as if the breath of the hall had drawn in and held. "The Vale convenes," Lord Nestor said, his voice a bray softened by years and rooted in this hall as surely as the great pillars. At the request of Lord John Royce and others of standing, the lords of the Vale speak and hear the matter of the death of Lysa of House Arryn, regent of the Vale, and the governance of the Vale since that day. He paused. "We choose, as in elder times, to sit as peers and weigh this in council, not to leave it to single combat, for the Vale remembers its oaths and prefers the weight of many hands on a beam to the trick of one sword." There were nods at that. The Vale loved its old phrases, and the old phrase hid a small defiance in it. This is not King's Landing. We do not let a half-mad king choose the shape of our justice. The Lord Protector may be heard, Lord Nestor said, and stepped aside. Petyr did not rush to stand. He smoothed his hand once across the table, as if it had a wrinkle in it, and the gesture made a few men lean forward, in case there was a secret under his palm. Then he stood, and the mockingbird pin caught the light again. He had a voice that could pour, and he poured now. "My lords," he began, not in a cry but in something close to a confidant's tone, as if he spoke to each of them privately, and the others were only eavesdropping. "When I came to the Vale, it was not for honor, which I possess in common with every man here, but for duty, which I possess because I was asked. Lysa Arryn, who is not here to answer for herself, wrote to me in King's Landing with fear in her heart. Fear for her son, fear for the jealousies of courts. She asked my aid. She asked me to bring her peace. I did what I could. Since her tragic death, I have done what any man called to service must do. Protect the person of young Lord Robert. Keep these mountains free of winter wolves, both four-footed and two. Balance the ledgers so that we could, even in a season lean of grain and fat of snow, feed our people and pay our men. That is an unglorious sentence, my lords. It is not a song. Then, what shall we sing then?" Sir Lin called lightly. "The Mockingbird's Lament." A chuckle ran like a fox along the benches and vanished. Petyr allowed the chuckle to step neatly past him without catch. "We are lords," he said. "We know that lament is the true music of governance. But I do not ask for lament. I ask only that you look with the eyes of men who have kept their own halls. What have I done that has harmed this Vale?" "Invited trouble into it," Bronzeyon said, untroubled himself. "The old words were good ones, Nestor. We put weight on the beam. Now let me set mine. Lysa Tully was my liege lord's wife and lady of the Eyrie. The song that sings of her death is tuneless. Men do not open doors in drugged despair to throw themselves upon the air, not after letters of terror sent and boy guarded like a jewel. And yet that is the tale we are given. A singer confessed to forcing her steps. That singer has his tongue still, and we will hear him. A bastard girl was with her. We will hear her. The maester gave a draft that night. We will hear him. And you, Petyr Baelish, were there. Ben? The words fell with no music in them at all. Only wait. We will hear. We will hear. The hall seemed to grow smaller around that pledge until there were only the dais and the facing ranks, and the speaking place between them where men could lay down truth like a cloak and see who would pick it up. Elaine listened to the blood in her ears. It beat softly and insisted on being counted, like the bells. She watched Petyr as other men watched their hands when they gambled. He did not blink more often than another man. He did not lick his lips more often. He did nothing that would have made a watching girl say, "He is lying." He tilted his head a fraction, a mere admission that a point had been made and must be answered like any other. "Summon who you wish," Petyr said. "Summon the ghosts as well. Summon all the old grudges against new men with small names. I will answer." He did not look at Bronzion as he said that last. He looked instead at Sir Nestor, and then at the gathered faces of lesser men who wore borrowed silks over good wool. "Begin with the maester," Lord Redford said. His voice had the even chill of a winter river. Maester Coleman came in with a dignity that sat awkwardly upon him, like a borrowed mantle. He had the color of old paper and a half-remembered look about his eyes, as if he had walked to the hall and lost one of his thoughts along the way. He bowed as if his joints had been forged stiff. "You gave Lady Lysa a potion that night," Bronzion said without preamble. "What was in it?" "A soporific," Coleman said. "Valerian root. Sweetened with honey." He stopped, swallowed. "I had refused other drafts at her request. There were demands from her. There was grief. She had quarreled with Lord Petyr." The maester's eyes moved like a rabbit's, quick and turning, seeking the hole in the bracken that led away from the hounds. "There was always noise in her chambers," he said. "The child is... he is delicate. He screams when he wakes. I had thought if she slept. Did the draft, given in your judgment, predispose her to self-murder?" Lord Templeton asked. He was a handsome man with a mouth too pretty to be severe, but at the question, it became severe. "No," Coleman said. "Not unless the world itself predisposes a soul to fly." The dose was small. She would have been drowsy. It would not have made her stumble, save perhaps if her feet were unsure, and the ground given over to emptiness. And was there emptiness? Bronzion asked softly. Coleman closed his eyes and opened them again. "There is a moon door in the Lord's High Hall," he said. "There has always been one. It is made that way. It is not emptiness, my lords. It is intention carved into stone." Petyr stood with his hands at his back. Elaine knew that stand. She had watched him in a dozen rooms. There was a kind of stillness at the heart of him when he wanted to be believed. It always amazed her that it worked. "And the singer?" Lord Belmore asked. "We must hear the singer now before he forgets his songs." They brought Marillion from the dunghill he lived in beneath the keep in a clean shirt and dirty chains. He stumbled once on the steps but did not fall. Someone had shaved him too close, as if they feared that a beard could hide a blade. He looked smaller to Elaine than he had when he sang in the garden, and he looked larger. Sorrow did that. Something about the way it fills a man who has nothing else. His mouth, that had been the best of him, was cracked at the corner and healing poorly. He saw the dais and flinched like a beaten horse. "You confessed before the guards who held you," Lord Nestor said. "You said you forced Lady Lysa to her death. Are you yet that man?" Marillion laughed then, a sound like a string breaking. "Am I yet that man?" he said. "My lords, I am less than that man, and more than him. I am back of that man and ahead of him. I am a man whose fingers remember sweetness and whose throat remembers wine. I am a man whose nails remember a floor that tore them. Confession? A singer confesses every time he opens his mouth. Betty." Lord Redford's mouth tightened. "Tell us what you did," he said. "Tell us what you saw." Marillion lifted his hands as if they had a harp to rest on them. The chains clinked. "I made love with a lady," he said. "I made her think so. For a song must be sung to the end when it is begun, and she had been a song in my ears since the first day. I was drunk with her and with wine. I was a fool. She called me. The moon door called me too. Up. He lifted his face. I did not push her. They broke me for that, but I did not. There was a rush of wind and a rush of words, and then she was not in the hall. She was in the air. The hall had become the air. The only hands upon her were the hands of sky. I would have kept her if I had been a god. Then, who else was present? Bronzion asked. The singer turned his head toward Elaine, and the look in his eyes made her stomach compress. He saw her more clearly than any of the lords did. The bastard girl, he said softly. The lord who is no lord. Name him, Lord Templeton said. Petyr Baelish, Marillion said, and closed his eyes, as if he had finally sung the note that had been hurting his throat all this time. A murmur went up like gnats rising in summer heat. Petyr did not movingly deny. He waited for the sound to reach its proper height, and then laid a word against it like a lid on a pot. I found them, he said. The singer had no permission to be so close to my lady. He had been warned. The door was open. The wind, he gave the smallest of smiles, bitter as apple seed. The wind does what it wishes in the eyrie. If men imagine they can force that door, they imagine too much. The bastard girl was present because she is my ward and my lady's companion. Had I not been present, there is no telling what would have become of the boy. Perhaps the singer would have put his hands upon him as well. Naum. Marillion made a sound, halfway between a sob and a laugh. I played for the boy, he said. I taught him little tunes. He was never kinder to anyone than to me. It took very little for men to decide that the man with no power was lying. It took less than that for them to decide that the man with power was. The hall breathed again, in and out, as the tide of belief shifted and found no bank to rest against. Bronzion's face gave nothing. Lord Belmore's mouth pursed like a woman's, and Miranda Royce's bright gaze hopped from face to face as if it were her sport to learn the shape of each man's thought by watching his eyes. What of the girl? Bronzion said at last. Call the girl. The world became glass to Elaine then. The planks of the dais were glass. The steps were glass. The air was a glass bowl placed over her head with the sound of the room echoing in it. She stood. She looked into Petyr's face because she could not help it, because habit held her as silk holds a wrist, soft and strong. He did not nod. He did not do anything as crude as that. He turned his head the smallest fraction, not toward her, toward the hall itself, as if to say, Here, see what we have made of you. Now go and be it. Bronzion's eyes were on her, as hard and old as runestone. Speak your name for the hall, he said. Speak it as you would in a sep. Elaine Stone, she said through the glass. Bastard daughter of Lord Petyr. Of Petyr? It was Lord Templeton who asked that, and the question itself was a courtesy, a way for him to pull a thought apart with his fingers and see whether anything rattled inside it. Of Petyr, she said. He acknowledged me. You were present that night, Bronzion said. What did you see? She had told herself 100 times that she would not tremble. She trembled. She set her hands at her sides and pressed the palms into her skirts until her fingers hurt. The hurt steadied her. Lady Lysa asked me to her chambers, she said. She was unhappy. She had not slept in 3 nights, and the boy had taken a fit. Beg pardon, my lords, a shaking. The singer had come when he was not wanted. Lord Petyr came and sent him away. She swallowed. I did not see him go through the door. I heard the song of the wind when Lady Lysa opened it. She said she would fly. She had said so before when she was unhappy. She walked toward it. Lord Petyr took her hands and begged her to step back. I thought he had her. I thought I would step toward them and smooth her hair and tell her the boy was safe. Only, she closed her eyes and saw the space of air again, as if it had been carved at the foot of her bed. Only there was no more floor. That is what I saw. There was more she had seen. She had seen Petyr's mouth near Lysa's ear. She had seen his lips move. She had seen the sudden sway of a woman whose body had always been a little afraid of the place where it ended. She had seen hands that could count coin in the dark grip a wrist. She had seen something so small and quick that even her own eye had almost not caught it. A step that was more a suggestion of a step. A suggestion that was also a push. She did not say those things. It was not that she could not. It was that the word would make a bridge, and she would have to walk upon it to a place where Sansa Stark stood bareheaded, and the hall saw her. Elaine's stone was the bridge she stood on, a span of careful planks over a drop without bottom. She did not know yet where the other side lay. Bronze's silence felt like a judgment without words. Lord Redford said, "You believe the lady meant to throw herself?" "I believe she wished to be gone from grief," Elaine said softly. "I believe she wanted the air to hold her as when she was a girl and swung from a rope over a river. I believe she did not know the difference." "One does learn differences," Lord Belmore said, not unkindly. Petyr's voice came then, smooth as a finger on silk. "She does not know that difference because she was a child when she last had kindness," he said, as if they spoke of Elaine still and not of Lysa. "When the Riverlands went to war, the little birds there grew very lean. Some blew away. Some were caught by hawks. One flew instead to King's Landing and learned to sing for wolves. That is the girl you asked to weigh the life and death of a lady." Men looked at her again as if they might see the child he had spoken of, dirty and small beneath the lashes in some sunless kitchen. She kept her eyes on Bronze. The old lord's face did not soften. "We will hear others," he said. "We will hear Sir Oswald of the garrison who saw the singer come and go on other nights. We will hear Sir Lothar Brune." He did not say, "We will hear the boy." Even the old way made room for mercy. "We will hear what was moved and paid in these months. We will weigh not only a single night." They heard all of it. They heard Sir Oswald Kettleblack, summoned and set sweating, tell lies with the same art with which he had always told them, but with less courage, now that coin was farther off and ropes closer. They heard Lothar Brune speak with a bluntness that carried the sound of steel a long way under it. They heard numbers, and the room dulled under them, as a meal dulls a man. Numbers from the ledgers, numbers in Petyr's clean hand, numbers said by Sir Nestor, as if they were invocations in a tongue of worship. There was money enough, it seemed. Coin going out and coin coming in, and sometimes coin that seemed to go out only to walk a long road around and come back through some other gate wearing a different cloak. Men did not love to hear of coin walking. Men preferred swords. The old way, at least, might have given them swords. When the sun bled itself out along the teeth of the mountain, they were no closer to justice than they had been at morning. Petyr had answered each question like a man who had expected that exact question all his life and rehearsed his pleasure in answering it. Bronze had set each answer on the beam and looked to see how it tipped. Sir Lyn Corbray had made 2 delicate jokes and 2 more coarse ones and watched to see which men laughed at which. By the time candles were renewed a second time, the hall had the tightness of a room where a family has quarreled and will eat together anyway. "We will speak again tomorrow," Lord Nestor said at last, when the candle wax had run in pale rivers and the hall's breath was weary. "The Vale is not a man with a sword who can finish all argument with a cut. We will sit as we vowed to sit. We will hear." They rose according to rank and knot of blood and went to their chambers. Elaine stood very still on the dais until all movement below had become the slow seepage of servants clearing, and men who slept cheaply, looking for a warm wall. Then she let herself breathe. When she stepped down, her knees wobbled, and she nearly sat upon the second stair with no grace at all. Petyr's hand appeared under her elbow and steadied her. "You were very good," he murmured. The words were praise and pressure both. "I was not," she said, hearing her own honesty. "I was what I am." "That is exactly why you were good," Petyr said. "You were not a player in a mummer's tent trying for a queen. You were a bastard girl in a hall of lords, and the hall believed you." He touched a curl of her hair that had loosened from the pins and tucked it back with so gentle a pressure she felt it down her spine. "Come, let us walk. There is a foolish custom here, that a man should walk upon the battlements and feel the wind in him after a day spent under stone." The battlements were a line of teeth against the sky, and the sky was a bruise deepening. The wind had a taste of iron filings and night birds. Below, the yard lay like a chessboard after a game no one had won. Men moved in little knots, words falling from them like stiff leaves. "It will not be a sky cell," Petyr said. "If they convict me, which they will not, it will be a public matter. They love sight more than blood here. They will want to be seen wanting the right thing." "Do you want the right thing?" Elaine asked, and wished the question had not left her mouth the instant it did. "I want the thing that keeps you from starving, and the boy from falling, and me from being torn into 9 pieces by men who will each carry a piece back to his hall as if it were a relic," Petyr said. "Make that the right thing and I will want it with all my heart." Lynn Corbray laughed. She said. He smiled, eyes narrowing to pleased slits. "Ah, did he laugh when I wanted him to?" "He laughed when men were ready to laugh," she said. "You hear the room," he said, and there was something like admiration in it, real as bread. "Bronzion does not laugh. He listens. He has decided already that he will be just. That is the worst kind of man to convince." "They will call me again," Elaine said. "They will ask me different words until I say a different meaning. They will ask the same thing with a cheeky smile, and then with a hand on a sword pommel." "Then so." "They will," Petyr agreed. "When they do, remember that a room has weather, and you can wait for it to change. Sometimes it rains. Sometimes a cloud moves off, and a man will decide he never liked the shade after all. Sir Lyn will cloud them when I ask him to. Sir Nestor will tell a story. Lady Miranda will drop a cup and spill wine where it will stain." He leaned on the parapet. She leaned beside him, and the stone under her forearms was the temperature of water boiled and lately forgotten. There was a rustle to her left. Miranda Royce appeared like a moth in her lake blue gown, and a cloak white as feather down. She did not step with the stealth of a conspirator. She stepped with the confidence of a girl who had always been allowed upon walls. "Well," she said, "it will be a fine thing when we make a song of this in 3 years with half the names wrong, and the other half made prettier." "Are you a wicked man, Lord Baelish?" asked the singer, Petyr said. "I would," Miranda said, "but I suspect he would answer better if I had a harp and was 12 handspans taller." She turned her bright glance upon Elaine. "They will make you cry tomorrow if they can. Men like that, it makes them feel like fathers." "They will not," Elaine said, and tried to make the words as heavy as stone. It felt like putting on a cloak she had not grown into. "They might," Miranda said, not unkindly. "It will not matter. There are tears enough in the Vale to water a field. We will plant fat barley in them one day." She leaned her arms on the parapet, imitating Elaine's pose exactly. "Do you think Bronzion loves justice for justice sake, or because it makes his runes shine?" "Why not both?" Petyr suggested. "Indeed," Miranda said. And the subject, as far as she was concerned, was math done. She pushed her chin into her collar. "Lord Nestor says the old way is best. He would say that if the old way were to put a dying cow in a high chair and crown it. He likes things as they were, if he can be certain that he is the thing that continues between then and now. One day I will find a new way simply to make him scowl." "Then shall." She left them laughing, and when her footfalls had faded, the wind resumed its work in the merlons. "Do you see?" Petyr asked softly. "This is a hall of habits. We only need to make the older habit wake before the new one lays down." "What is the older habit?" Elaine said. "Obedience to a chain of bread," Petyr said. "Sir Nestor remembers the first time he could tell a kitchen to send sweet cakes up to a guest chamber. Lord Belmore remembers the first coin he was ever given for saying nothing. Bronzion remembers the oath he swore to John Arryn." Petyr tipped his head and the mockingbird pin flashed again. "I remember climbing the stairs of River Run and hearing a fox laugh somewhere in the reeds." She remembered too many stairs in too many places and kept her mouth closed upon them. They slept hard and woke to bells again. The second day drew more men than the first, as if the mountains themselves had rumbled and taken the shape of cloaks. Squires ran sopping with sweat despite the cold, carrying messages as if the weight of history were in sealed wax. The boy lord did not come. His absence was its own presence. The high chair above the dais stood empty with its little falcon wings spread, and the emptiness judged them all, or so it felt to Elaine, who could not stop glancing at it. They heard witnesses, and they heard rumor, which is a kind of witness that wears no boots. Someone had seen Petyr count coin in the night. Someone had seen Marillion drunk on a stair. Someone had seen Lady Lysa weep into her sleeves so long the sleeves were wet to the elbows. Someone had seen Sir Lynn slap a squire for running too near his sword, and then kiss the squire's cheek by way of apology. The hall took it all in with greed, and spat half out again. The chain of bread Petyr had named revealed itself. A servant who had a cousin who had a debt, a lord who had a friend who had a taste. The taste of coin is a flavor men forget they have acquired, and then cannot live without. It changed after noon. Bronzion asked for the door to be opened. There was a murmur at that, and a stillness that followed it. The moon door was not in this hall, but the words brought it into the room like a cold breath. "We will walk," Bronzion said, and his voice carried the authority of a man who did not ask and did not command, only said, "We will climb, and we will look upon the place where Lysa Arryn fell. We will stand upon that stone and we will ask our questions there. Truth is less clever when the wind is listening. It is a long climb from the gates to the Eyrie, if one does it by basket. It is longer done by foot. They did it by both, the lords who wished to feel their own legs, and the men who preferred the sway of the air on the rope. Elaine rode once and walked twice, her knees burning and her breath a dry thing that scraped her throat. Maya Stone led the mules, her hands sure on the rope, her laughter carrying ahead of the line like a bell. "Look at them with their fine soft boots," Maya said to Elaine once, falling into step beside her without breaking stride. "They think a mountain is a thing one can hire to bend. Did your lord ever climb to the Eyrie without a basket?" "Once," Elaine said. "With me." The memory stabbed her ribs and left a hollow there where she could lay a hand and feel the air move. "Then keep him," Maya said with a grin that was not cruel and not kind. "A lord who climbs is worth a sack of oats in winter." The Eyrie was white and sharp and stripped of ornament when they reached it. In winter it is utterly dead. In spring it is only mostly dead. There was color there today, but it was the color of men. The russet of a Royce cloak, the gray of Redfort, the glint of a belt buckle. The high hall had been opened and aired. The moon door had been freed of its shutters. It stood at the far end like an accusation. They entered in twos and threes. The wind walked at their sides and then leapt ahead to slap them on the throat. Elaine felt her vision go narrow at the edges, the way it did when one looks too long at a cliff face. The flagstones had been scrubbed, but her eye found the place on the stone where Lysa's feet had scuffed. She did not know that it had been scuffed. She told herself so, and did not believe herself entirely. Bronzion walked straight to the door and set his broad hands to either side of it, as if to measure its width. His fingers did not tremble. Sir Lynn stepped nearer and bowed to it, as if it were some lady whose favor he might beg. Petyr came last among the great men, his step light, his face grave as a brother's. He laid his hand upon the stone at the side of the door, and for a heartbeat looked like a man placing his palm on a cold brow. "Here," Bronzion said. He did not shout over the wind. He did not need to. "Say it here, Petyr Baelish. Say it again here where she fell. Menetrater." Lysa Arryn was weary and wounded in her mind, Petyr said. The wind took his hair and laid it back from his forehead like a lover's hand. She had more grief than any one body can be expected to contain. I begged her to step away. I took her by the wrists as a father would a child he loved who had wandered near a cliff. His voice went softer. She would not look at me. She looked at the sky, and the sky answered her. She stumbled. "Did you push her?" Bronzion asked. Elaine felt bile surge under her tongue and forced herself to swallow it without moving. Sir Lynn Corbray's profile in the wind looked like a statue's, more handsome for its cold. "I did not," Petyr said, and laid his hand flat upon the stone as if to swear it. Palm to rock. "By the seven, I did not." "Swear it by Jon Arryn," Bronzion said. and the room tightened around that name. Petyr looked at him then, full for the first time that day, and smiled with a sadness so complete it looked like affection. "I swear by the love I bore John Arryn," he said, "that I did not push his lady wife through this door." There was a catch on love, a hinge at the heart of the word where truth could swing either way. Elaine heard it. She could not have said whether any other man did. The wind blew like laughter over stone. Someone coughed. Someone shuffled. One of the lesser men of Belmore, whose ears had been frostbitten more than once, clapped his hands under his armpits like a boy to chase warmth. Elaine had thought they would be content with the stone, that the place would have the magic bronze Jan imagined, and that men would leave the Eyrie convinced of something new. They did not. They left with what they had brought, their convictions bundled close, and new words tucked into their belts like knives they did not yet need but might. The descent took another hour and another kind of courage. When they reached the gates again, the sun was a red coin, and someone had hung a pot of something thick and steaming in the yard, and men came to it with cupped hands. Truth did not. That evening, when Elaine sat alone in the small room that had been promised to maids once and was a ward's room now, she took out the comb Petyr had given her, carved from bone, and drew it through her hair by the candle until every snag was gone. It was a small task, and it calmed her more than any prayer could have. She thought of winter and of the river at Winterfell, which she would not name even inside her head. She thought of faces she could not allow herself to wear. She thought of the trial and how it had wrapped itself around her like a cloak she could not shrug off without showing the dress beneath. A soft tap at her door brought her up out of that thinking like a diver breaking the skin of a pond. "Come," she said, and the door opened just wide enough for Miranda to slip through. "I should not be here," Randa said, eyes bright as ever, and hair in a plait that had more escapees than captives. "But I am. I brought sugar almonds. Father says that sweets are the only honest comfort in a hall like this, because they admit they will be gone and leave you wanting." Bender whined. Elaine took one and let it melt. It tasted of the Reach and the sort of weddings where girls looked like flowers and men looked like men returned from war. "Thank you," she said. Randa put herself in a chair by the hearth as if it had been waiting for her. "It is a spectacle. At sea." "I know we call it trial, but truly, it is a spectacle. Father says old Nestor loves a reckoning. I say he loves an audience. Bronze Jan loves a relic and a promise. Lord Templeton loves his reflection in a polished cup. Die. Lord Belmore loves indignation as a widow loves black cloth." She leaned forward. "What do you love?" "Quiet," Elaine said. "Then I will speak less," Randa said cheerfully. "But I will say this first. If they cut Lord Petyr into 9 pieces, it will be very hard on your fortunes. If they don't cut him at all, it will be very hard on truth. The world is full of this kind of arithmetic." She stood, slipped 2 more almonds into Elaine's hand, and kissed her cheek quick, like a girl and not a lady. "Sleep. Dot. Or not. Tomorrow, Sir Lin will deliver a speech. He has been practicing it in his head since he was 10. He is very excited." "Then?" Sir Lin was very excited. On the 3rd day he rose with his peace-tied sword and a ribbon in his hair, as if for a feast, and requested the floor with a flourish so delicate it nearly became mockery. Bronze Jon's eyebrows climbed to the height of his runes. He granted it. Sir Lin bowed as if he had been born for bowing. "My lords," he said, "I am not a man of numbers. I leave numbers to men who weigh wheat and count coppers, and kiss the cheeks of usurers to make them feel like men. I am a man of steel and sinew. But even I can tell the worth of something that cannot be counted in ledgers. The worth of blood, the worth of a name, the worth of an oath." He tapped the breast of his doublet where his heart lay. "We have been asked to choose between memories. A woman's memory of a marriage, a man's of his own honor, a bastard girl's memory of the wind, a singer's of his pride. I tell you now, I will have none of the singer. If he were made of gold, they should melt him, and pour him into a useful shape. Nine. Harrow. The words delighted some men, disgusted others, and pleased Petyr very much for reasons that had little to do with their substance. Beside Elaine, Lothar Brun's stillness acquired burden. He was made silent by habit. The silence now was a choice. When Sir Lin had cut the room into the shape he desired, he turned to Bronze-Yon and made another bow. "My lord of Runestone," he said, and somehow made it an endearment. "You desire justice that will stand under sky. I too have knelt under the eyes and known the weight of stone witness. But this is not a thing the gods can reach for us. This is a matter for men. There is a boy to be protected above all. There is a Vale which will be laughed at by the low places if we show our throats and do not learn after King's Landing taught us. Keep the Lord Protector in place where we can see him. Give him a leash, if leashes please you. Make a council of you all, and set it on his table. But do not weaken us for the sake of punishing a man you used to dislike when he was a boy and made a foolish boast in a brothel." Nemderao. There was laughter at that, and there was a stir that had approval in it. Sir Lin smiled and appeared to take pleasure. Elaine watched him and looked for the moment when it became too much. It did not. He had the virtue of a controlled actor. He knew when to leave the stage. He bowed again and retreated. He did not glance at Petyr as he took his seat. He did not need to. Bronze-Yon stood when the sound had spent itself. "I hear a new way," he said. "Make a council of us all. Wear a leash." The words did not sit easy in his mouth. They were foreign metal. This is not a kennel. The Vale is not a hound to be managed while it snaps. It is a country sworn to law and to the body of its lord. The leash is the law already given to us. The old words and the old ways, and the promises we swore to John Aaron, and to his father, and to his father's father. The leash is judgment. The leash is, we will not be ruled by a man who cannot say how he came to rule. Now. And so it went. Day into day, words piling like drifted snow, the shape beneath them shifting as men moved under the weight. Elaine spoke twice more, and once she said a thing that was almost a truth, and it frightened her enough that she could not sleep until she had wrapped it in 3 smaller lies and fed it to herself like a sweet almond. Marillion sang without a harp, and the sound made 2 of the lesser lords weep and 1 snort with contempt. Maester Coleman remembered a measure he had forgotten the first day, and then could not swear it had been so. Sir Nestor, who loved reckoning, reckoned up how many swords the Vale could muster if the mountain clans came down again. And the number was enough to make Lord Belmore feel brave, and Lord Redford feel responsible. There were no sky cells. There was no blood on the floor. No man called for trial by combat. The Vale proved itself very civilized and very old, and in so proving, it made a web that had to catch something. On the evening of the 5th day, the wind died unexpectedly. The hall felt larger under that quiet. Candles burned without being worried into tears. Elaine sat on the dais with her palms flat on her knees to keep her hands from folding into themselves like dying birds. Petyr stood with his head bent to Lord Nestor's, talking about the thickness of that year's ice on the long lake, as if such matters were all he would ever care to discuss. Bronze-Yon sat by himself like a stone set slightly apart from other stones, and when he rose, no one thought he would speak. He was only going to walk. He did not. He walked to the speaking place and set both hands on the table between dais and floor. "We are not yet finished," he said, "but I am older than most of you, and I have learned that there are things one says when one is not finished. One is a vow to be fair. I have that vow in me. Another is a warning to a man one will not yet name guilty. Petyr Baelish, hear me. If a lie sits in your mouth like a cherry pit, spit it now. Not tomorrow. Not after you go to sleep and dream of new coin. Now. If the truth you hold in your hand is small, and you are ashamed of it, open your hand and let us see that you have at least that much. I went to war with John Aaron. I bled for him. If this is the hall where the truth that killed his lady will not sit, I will go from it and find a different hall to put it in. And now." Petyr lifted his head and looked at the old lord. For a moment, Elaine thought she saw in his face something that was not a mask at all. It was not remorse. She did not know its name. It went away too quickly for her to learn it. "I have no cherries in my mouth," he said mildly. "I have nothing to spit. I have only the truth I have told you since the first hour of the first day." He bowed to Bronzjan. "You loved Jon Arryn. So did I. In ways that would not please you. But were love all the same. I love his Vale as well. I will accept a council of the Vale's lords if it pleases you to tie a leash upon me. I will accept an oath stronger than any I have made before, that I will not move coin without Sir Nestor's countersign, that I will not raise a sword without Lord Redfort's tally, that I will not discipline a knight of the Vale without Lord Templeton's witness. I will tie myself if tying is all that will make men rest at night. But do not ask me to confess to a murder I did not do, because your heart aches for a woman. I will not." Bronzjan took his hands from the table. He looked tired, and that struck Elaine more deeply than any anger could have. "We will sleep," he said to no one, to everyone, and left the hall. Petyr let out a breath. It was not relief. It was calculation exhaling. He turned his head slightly, and the mockingbird pin winked. And Elaine realized that by offering the leash he had put a collar around each of the men he named. Sir Nestor would be responsible for countersign, Lord Redfort for tallies, Lord Templeton for witness. He would not be the only man to blame when the hall grew hungry. The leash was a rope that would be held by so many hands, none of them would feel the pull until it was too late. When she went to her room that night, she sat a long time with the candle burned low, listening to the new quiet. The wind had died. The keep breathed differently without it. She thought of wolves that were quiet, and then not. Of halls where truth sat in a corner, as if it had been told to behave while the men spoke. She thought of Jon Arryn, a name that lived on other men's tongues, and had the power of prayer. She thought of her own name and how it lived only when she did not speak it. She imagined a future where the council convened and Petyr smiled, and the boy did not fall, and the Vale was governed by a leash like a harp string thrummed by careful fingers. She imagined a future where Bronzjan built a separate hall, and named that hall Justice, and called men to it in 3s and 10s, until his hall was a country of its own. When she fell asleep, it was with her cheek on her arm, and the bone comb caught beneath her wrist, its teeth pressing crescents into her skin. The morning brought back the wind. The bells spoke again. The hall filled again with men and movement, and the days ahead promised to be like the days behind, for as long as men wished to pretend that time itself could be held steady. But something had shifted. Elaine knew it when Miranda came to her with hair unbound because she had risen late and laughed with no apology. She knew it when Lothar Brune stood closer than he needed to on the dais and did not mean anything by it. She knew it most when Bronzjan walked in and went not to the dais, but to the benches where lesser men sat, and spoke to them in voices too low to be stolen by the wind. When at last the call was made for judgments and oaths, and the business of making a leash was laid out like a chain on a smith's table, to be inspected link by link, Petyr turned his head just enough that she saw his profile. "Smile," he said without looking at her. And she did, and in smiling realized that the trial was not an engine that crushed the guilty and lifted the innocent. It was a loom. There were warps and wefts, the old words set like taut threads, the new promises laid across them, and men's hands going back and forth, until a cloth emerged that looked like something worth wearing. Cloth could be cut after. Cloth could be dyed. Cloth could be burned. For now it warmed. Outside, the mountains were the same sharpened blue they had been on the first morning, and the Eyrie glimmered faintly, a pale scar on the sky. The wind scraped the stone and worried at the shutters and kept its own counsel. Inside, the Vale set its teeth into an answer and found it chewy enough to last the winter. And Elaine stood in a hall where she had not yet said her true name and felt how close it was to the surface of her skin, like a word she could lift with a fingernail if she must, and chose for now not to. Oh, ka. There were new lords that morning, and old lords in new moods, and what had been a trial of a night had become a winter occupation. It seeped into the joints of the keep and made them ache. It changed the way men walked, straighter when eyes were on them, narrower when they thought themselves unwatched. It changed the way the servants spoke too. Even the kitchen had its court now. The woman who baked the salt loaves declared for justice in the old way, and would give no crust to any man she took for a flatterer, while the boy at the spit had a cleverer tongue than he had ever had, and tried his speeches on the dogs. The dogs were unimpressed. Elaine learned to measure the days by which men talked to which men on the dais, and who let himself be seen whispering to Sir Nestor's steward, and who did not trouble to hide his bargains. She sat at Petyr's left, and watched him give ground, and keep it the way a soldier gives ground, and keeps his life, not by standing like a rock, but by stepping where the sword is not. Bronzeon pressed. Lord Redford counted. Lord Belmore wanted to be seen wanting. Lord Templeton wanted to be seen not wanting at all. And always, when the room grew tired, Sir Lynn made it smile, and then careless, like a nurse who slips wine into a child to make it sleep. They had begun to shape the leash while pretending to shape a noose. They named it a council that would sit every fortnight under the gate's great beams, with a table long enough for all pride, and 2 chairs left deliberately empty for those who would fancy themselves too grand to sit, and would come anyway because the emptiness would nag at them. The council would count coin, hear petitions, set the tithe and the toll, and mark the muster rolls against the year's hunger. Lord Nestor would preside, as he had presided over the reckonings of lesser years. Lord Redford would keep the tallies. Lord Templeton would bring a cold eye to discipline. Bronzeon, who liked neither leashes nor rooms with too much talk, agreed to bear witness to the oaths writ and taken, and to lay his name under each decision like a weight. They wrote these things down in a tidy hand for men to put their marks beneath. The ink froze at the nib twice that day, and had to be warmed at a candle. On the second of those days, Elaine took a cup of broth to Lord Robert herself, when Maester Coleman had finished with him. The boy had been pale as paper and peevish all morning, and as ever he grew softer when she came in with a cup, and her voice pitched low. He sat under furs with his skinny legs like pale sticks, and his hands restless on the coverlet. The window seat had been piled with cushions to keep out the cold, but the crack where 2 stones did not quite meet still let the mountain speak. "You are late," he told her, as if he were in command of hours. The bells rang, and then they rang another way, and then they stopped. And I counted the stop times, and you were not here. I was hearing the bells too. She told him, setting the cup in his hands. Steadying it with her fingers so it did not slop, and hearing how many men they called. They have long names, everyone, and all of them are fond of being said aloud. I hate them, the boy muttered, and took a sip and then a larger one. They look at me and do not see that I am the Lord. They look at him, and they make their faces like butter. They see you very well, Elaine said. You are a light for them. They squint. Butter faces are only faces that squint too much. He frowned at that, considering, and his mouth softened. You will not go away, he said, abrupt as a broken plate. If they put him away, you will not go away. I will not go away, she promised, because it was a promise she could make. She did not say where promises go when the man they are tied to is cut. I will sleep, he declared, as if that put them even. He pushed the cup at her then, and it was as well, for his hands had begun to shake. Maester Coleman's eyes flicked to her and away again, relief like sweat upon his brow. He would not dare give the boy the sweet sleep today, not with Bronzeon roaming the hall like a memory on legs. They had begun to wean him. Petyr had commanded it, and the maester obeyed in the way of men who obey because the command says aloud what they have long wished to do in secret. Sleep, Elaine whispered, drawing the fur up, smoothing it lightly over his bird-bone chest. Dream of falcons. I dream of a night with wings, he mumbled, lids fluttering. He flies down and stabs the men who laugh. Then he needs no wings, she said, but softly, when he had already begun to breathe even. She sat till the breath steadied, and then steadier, and when she stood, Coleman stopped her with a lifted finger, beckoning her to the hearth where the brazier whispered. There had been fewer shakes, he said without preface, as if she had been in his head, as often she was. But the headaches, he clutches here. The maester touched his own temples lightly, thumb and forefinger like crab claws. And when the bells ring in a certain way, it chills him. I wonder if... He did not say sweet slept. He did not need to. The Lord Protector is wise to take it away, he added, and then looked as if he had said a thing that might be weighed and found either loyal or not, depending on which hand held the scale. Wise, Elaine said, and left him that single anchor in a room full of currents. When she returned to the hall, they had begun the talk of Harold Harding, which was a way of talking about the future without frightening it off. It had started with a whisper out of the benches, and hopped from one table to another like a bird that wanted to be caught. Lady Anya Wainwood had come down that day from Ironwax wrapped in grey wool and dignity. She kept the boy at her hall. Bronzian kept him also, as much as a man can keep a squire who will be a lord whether he is kept or not. They moved the name carefully at first. The heir presumptive, Harry the heir. The boy with the long legs and the impatience of a colt. They did not say, when the boy in the furs coughs and does not stop. He should be seen, Lord Belmore declared, with a superior briskness that tried to hide its hunger to be first. The veil is not a cloak to be cut in a dark room. Let the men look upon the cloth they will wear. He is a squire, Anya Wainwood said dryly, and did not lift her eyes from her hands, which were folded neatly upon the table. He should be seen on a horse and with a spear point that goes where he wishes it. He should be seen winning. He should not be brought into a hall and made to stand on cold stone, while old men ask him to remember whose aunt married whose cousin. None know. Then show him on a horse, Lord Templeton murmured. There are fields even in winter that one can ride on if one has feet for it. The gates have a yard. Petyr's head turned slightly, the way a falcon's does when it spies a current. A yard is too small for the heir of the Vale, he said. A yard is for boys. The heir must be seen by the mountains. We will make a day of it in the lower meadow where the wind comes down gentler and the snow lies in stripes and the ground will take a hoof. In 3 days, when the weather softens, Lord Belmore will stand on one side of the course and shout that there's a pit where there is none, because he likes to try men. Bronzion will stand on the other and not shout at all, because he likes to see who learns without a hand held to them. The boy will ride the strip between and not fall, if he is the boy we hope he is. Then shall. My lords, said Lady Anya then, still looking at her folded hands. There is a girl you keep at your left, Lord Protector. The bastard one. She will stand too, and the heir of the Vale will ride past her 3 times. If he looks right and not left each time, he shall be thought proud. If he looks left and not right, he shall be thought a boy with a quick eye for a cloak. If he looks neither way in the 4th pass and keeps his point true, I shall be content. Then shatter. That can be arranged, Petyr said, and smiled without any mockery in it. You make me love you, Lady Anya. You love only yourself, she said, and finally looked up, and the glance was cool as sleet. I should be glad of that if I were the young and pretty one. As I am the old and honest one, I am not sure. Elaine felt the heat climb her neck as if someone had touched coals to her skin. She kept her eyes on the table's clean edge and did not look at any face. She did not let her mouth say any name. After the council was done for that morning, and Sir Nestor had declared that he would hear disputes over pasture rights in the lower hall, and thereby send the lesser lords into smaller quarrels that would occupy them enough to keep them from greater ones, Elaine went out to the yard. The cold made every man's breath into a name he could write in the air if he were quick. A stableman led out a rangy bay with a white blaze and said with pride to anyone who would listen that he had once led the horse under Sir Vardasegan's saddle, before the hand's tourney and the hard ride up the mountain with the dwarf and the sellsword. Names were always being born in this yard, and then dying in it. Maya Stone had a length of rope in her hands and was showing the boy how to coil it the right way, which was a thing that looked simple and made fools of men who thought so. Maya shook the loop out and made it fall like a quiet river into her palm, and then tossed the whole coil and caught it again with a laugh that had no meanness in it at all. You catch better than you throw, she told the boy, and then saw Elaine and grinned. You look like a lady who has watched men braid hairs for a week and has just remembered her own hair is her own. Something like, Elaine said, letting herself breathe the honest smells. dung and old straw and leather that had seen sweat and wind and water. They are to bring Harry. She added, because there was no point in not saying aloud what the Yard already knew. Harry brings himself, Maya said. That's part of the noise with him. She handed the rope to the boy and wiped her palms on her breeches, which had once belonged to some man taller and now belonged to her the way mountains belong to goats. He rides lightly. He thinks lightly. That is a good thing in a boy, and a terrible thing in a lord. We'll see which one he plans to be. Bah! She did not add, we will see which one you plan to make him. But the words pricked Elaine's skin nonetheless. Petyr had said the name like a coin was being tested on his teeth. Harold Harding and the bastard who was not. A betrothal could knit 10 quarrels into one rope. A betrothal could put a noose on a throat as easily as a leash on a man's hand. Harry came down from Iron Ox in the afternoon with the snow in his hair and on his shoulders, like a crown he had not yet earned, and never would if he were not careful where he stepped. He rode a chestnut with spring in it, even over frozen ground, and he had the look that boys have when they have been told they will be men soon and believe it, which is to say he had not yet learned to be careless with his mouth when older men were listening, and had not yet learned to keep his mouth shut when pretty girls were not. His face was the fine, clear kind that shows when a thought moves behind it. He was all knees and hands and impatience, and he had a smile that had its own light. He was announced with far more flourish than his rank warranted. Lord Nestor had a taste for trumpets. Elaine stood where Lady Anya had set her, to the left of the strip of meadow they had marked and trodden hard, and tested with a mule. She wore a cloak the brown of a doe, and a hood thrown back, and her hair had been brushed till it lay like a secret that had decided to be beautiful. She let the wind take one curl so it seemed unconsidered. It was a game, and she hated herself a little for knowing the rules so well. He saw her. Boys always saw girls first, even when they learn later to pretend they do not. They see a place where they might put their eyes and rest, and be admired for resting well. Harry's glance came to her like a sparrow. Lit, lifted, came again. He doffed his glove, and the cold bit his hand pink. He did not wince, which was a small point in his favor. He bowed to Lady Anya first, because he had been taught, and then to Bronjean last, because he had also been taught and enjoyed letting that pleasure show. When at last he turned to Elaine, it was with all the understanding a boy has when he sees a pretty stranger in a hall, where older men are speaking about him as if he were grain. Lady, he said, and the word had a height to it that made it larger than it needed to be. I am Harry. Elaine, she said, keeping her smile soft and tight as a drawn bow. I hope you will show us beautiful riding. It will bore us all dreadfully if you fall into a drift. Damn. If I fall, he said, grinning, I shall do it so beautifully that the snow will applaud me. That would be a first, Maya Stone said behind her, in a voice that made 2 of the men near them choke on their mulled wine. The snow has so few hands. Harry laughed, good-natured, not stung. Another mark in his favor, and swung up. He had the seat that boys who live too much in halls never truly learn. The seat that comes from riding mule paths, where a wrong look at a wrong stone becomes a story told at a burial. His first pass was swift and straight. Lord Belmore shouted about a pit that no man could see, and Harry did not turn his head. Bronjean stood like an oak and let the wind arrange his cloak around him, and Harry did not glance for comfort. The second pass he did with his spear point lower and truer, and his mouth not smiling, and Elaine saw the place where concentration erased the boy and left the outline of a man. The third he gave them a bit of show. He was not so wise yet as to avoid it, rising in his stirrups at the end and letting the chestnut dance. He did not look left in the first 3. He looked left on the 4th, when there had been no call for a 4th, as if he had found his own reason to do it. It had begun to snow with those big feathery flakes that look like generosity and are in fact only a change of mood. A flake melted in his eyelashes as he turned his head and caught sight of her. He checked his horse without seeming to and brought it to a step's length from her, and in that step's width he let himself look longer than courtesy wanted. You should wear blue, he said, all boy again, uncertain whether he ought to be ashamed of what he had just said, and unwilling to be. It would be kind to the men. "The men have the sky," she said, and it was the kind of answer Sansa Stark would once have given. And Elaine Stone hated it for that reason, and loved it because Sansa had not died entirely if her mouth could still make such a sound. "Ride once more," she added, and felt wicked because she wished to see the line of his shoulder again, and because somewhere behind her Petyr's attention pricked up like the ear of a cat. Harry did ride once more, and this time he did not look anywhere but down the spear shaft his life would be measured along. When he came back, Bronze nodded once, which was a benediction in his language. Lady Agnes' mouth softened, and Lord Belmore declared himself freezing and demanded hot wine, which was his way of complimenting a boy without risking his old pride on a young man's future. Later, Harry found Elaine at the edge of the yard pretending to be looking for a groom to send with a message. He had chosen his moment cunningly enough that she wondered whether some of the lightness she had seen in him was the ease of a hawk's feather rather than a boy's. His hair had not quite dried. Snow had puckered it into little curls that would be ridiculous in a less handsome face. "You know," he said, as if resuming a conversation, "they say you are Lord Petyr's bastard. They say what they always say, when a man does not advertise the truth with a trumpet." She answered, and shifted her gloves in her hands. "What do you say?" "I say a man can make a virtue of silence," Harry said lightly, and then let the lightness drop a shade. "They will marry me to someone. It is the way of it." He waited with a boy's expectation that the world would answer him, and when it did not, he said, "I hope she will be kind." "Be kind first," Elaine said. "It is easier to receive kindness when one knows what it costs." He looked puzzled by that, as boys are puzzled by coins that do not ring true. "You speak like a septa sometimes," he said, and then with a quick smile, "and then other times like the girl who will make the septa forgive her." "Then you will be well schooled," she said, and saw the moment when he thought he had seen through her to the ordinary girl beneath. There is safety in being read so shallowly. There is danger too, but it is the sweet kind. The sort that leaves you warm when you walk away, and colder than before when you are alone, and the door is closed. Bronze's warning to Petyr that evening was flint against steel. Elaine saw the spark jump, even if it landed on stone and did not catch yet. The old lord cornered Petyr in the shadow of a pillar, where the light from the upper windows made bars like a sky cells in the dust, and spoke not with anger, but with weariness that had put on the shape of resolve to give itself strength. "You put the boy on a course," he said. "Now do not drive him as men drive mules until his tongue swells and his eyes roll. If you have truly offered leash, take it upon yourself first. There will be a council. There will be no more secret coin." "Besundain?" "There will be no more secret coin," Petyr said, because he had already made the council the place where secrets would have a larger table, and nicer cups, and fewer men to share them with. "And the boy will be led with sugar, not the lash." "You know me, my lord, Data." "I know your measure," Bronze said, which is not the same thing. He looked over Petyr's shoulder and found Elaine, which made her feel discovered, though she had not moved. "You look like a girl I saw once in the court at King's Landing," he said to her, not as a question but as a memory that had returned and embarrassed him by its lateness. "A northern girl. She was brave and foolish, and she wept for a father and did not see that the city was a hunger that eats fathers." "I have never been to King's Landing," Elaine said softly, and kept her face smooth as iced water, and held her hands steady where he could see them so he would not think to look where he should not. Bronze grunted, a sound that acknowledged both her words and his own knowledge that words were a poor currency when the goods were hidden. He left them then, the runes on his brooch catching a last lick of light, and Elaine felt the first small tremor of fear for a thing she could not name without smashing it. There were other tremors. In the night, a runner came panting with a tail from the high road. A grain caravan out of the green glen had been taken in the narrow place where the old King's Way squeezes between two shoulders of rock. 2 men dead, 1 woman, 3 mules missing, 4 sacks of barley burst and black on the snow. The mountain clans had come down at last. The painted dogs or the stone crows or the moon brothers, No one could say. The runner had seen only shadows and the odd pale flash of a face painted like a skull. A winter hall loves nothing so much as a threat that justifies its own existence. The council rose before it had been called and clattered like a kitchen with too many cooks. Lord Redford wanted to count spears. Lord Templeton argued for a patrol to show presence. Lord Belmore declared the clans would scatter like hens if only the gates sent a sharp shout. Bronzion said nothing for a long time, which made more sense than all of them. Petyr listened with his head a little to one side, as if the whole room were a song, and he were finding the key. "We will send a party up," he said at last, and looked to Lothar Brune. "Not to chase shadows. To lay bread with the goatherd at Stonehelm and learn news, and then go to the Narrows and look. We will carry sawn timbers and a dozen iron spikes, and we will set a gate of our own where the road pinches. We will do it there and at 2 other places before spring." His smile was all courtesy. His words were iron. "If the clans want us, they can come as men, through a door. I am weary of cat's paws." "It will take men," Lord Redford said. "I have them. I will put them in your man's hands." He did not say, "I will put them in your leash." He would never say that. Bronzion's eyes narrowed. "If you put a door on a mountain, the mountain will teach you why it had none," he said. But there was reluctant respect under the disapproval. Old men hate new tricks until they can claim to have taught them. The party left at noon. Lothar Brune with 12 of the gate's best, 2 of Redford's who knew the road like the whorls on their thumbs, and Maya Stone because she would not be told no by any lord who had not ridden the baskets 3 times in a storm. Elaine stood on the wall and watched them go, and felt that strange hollow that comes when men you care for, whether you know it or not, walk toward a narrow place in winter. Petyr stood beside her and watched too, but his watching had a different shape. He had already calculated how many days it would take to set the first spikes, and who would bring the iron from where, and which petty lord would claim that his valley should have the door first, and how to give it to him in such a way that 2 other men would be grateful for not having received it. "They will be seen," he said. "That is all we need today. Tomorrow we will need more. But today, being seen will do." "What will the clans do?" she asked. "What they have always done," he said. "Come down when they are hungry. They are hungrier now than they have been in 20 winters. That is to our advantage if we offer them salt and trinkets. That is to our disadvantage if another man offers them knives." She knew the other man he meant without him saying a name. Knives had come up the mountain before with coin from the west. The clans had cut all summer and autumn with them. The war had taught the Vale something it had never wished to learn. You cannot be a mountain and an island both. The days lengthened without growing any warmer. The sun climbed higher and produced no heat. It was like a king who shows himself to his people and gives them no bread. Elaine walked the lower meadow with Miranda and listened to her sing fragments of old songs in a voice that began in jest and ended somewhere near tenderness, and marveled that a girl could exist who was so honest and so unafraid in a world made to punish all the honest, unafraid girls. She fed the hawks with the falconers and learned, by watching, what made their eyes go brighter and what made them go dull. She read the ledgers again, as Petyr asked her to, and took her pleasure in the clean lines of columns that added up to more than what had gone out, and in the neat trick of sending a sack of barley to a poor hill, not because it would feed a great number, but because the man there would tell his neighbors that the gates had remembered him in winter. At night she slept, and did not sleep, and dreamed twice of a hall full of candles where her father stood and smiled at her, as if he had never gone to the black sword and the seared smell. She woke both times with her hand reaching, and knew she had reached for Petyr in the dream, and hated herself for it, and hated herself for hating herself, and got up and brushed her hair, until it lay as if nothing in the world could ruffle it. On the 7th day Lothar Brune returned, with his cloak stiff as bark and his beard bitten by the cold, and with him, Maya, whose laughter had frozen at the edges and turned brittle. They brought back story. Wood set, iron hammered, a gate begun, a goat herder who wanted a girl for his son, and would settle for a fat pig, a dead man with a painted ear, nailed to a rock like a warning or a sign. They brought back 2 sacks of barley that had not been burst, but had been found neatly stacked at the bend below the narrows, which meant the clans were not only hungry, they were courteous when it suited them, which was worse. There was a woman with a bone needle through her nose who spoke the high tongue. Maya told the council, her eyes bright with the kind of respect men learn for enemies who will not be small for them. She said they had taken one of ours and would give him back for iron and salt, and a brass pot. They said they had not cut him. They had only made him think. Bael. Who? Lord Redford demanded, and Maya shrugged. A boy with a mouse on his shield, she said. He squeaked when the wind came. The mad mouse. Sir Lynn said with delighted malice and took his ease against the pillar. The ribbon in his hair today was white as the snow outside. So the Riverlands have sent their vermin into our cupboards. Sir Shadrick has traveled for his bread like any man, Petyr said mildly. He had hired the mouse himself in truth, and set him to snuffle around Eleni's secrets, and then kept him close where his snout did no harm, and might do some good if it startled a different prey. He is not of the Vale. He is not our charge. If the clans wish to trade a pot and a sack for him, that is better than trading a head. Bronze Jan said nothing. He did not like to bargain with thieves even when the wind made bargains the only way to keep your candles. But he did not waste breath. He would send the iron. He would send the pot. He would send men to take a measure of the woman with the bone needle and the boy with the mouse. The trial, which was also a governance, which was also a winter pastime, went on. And as the hall made its winter around itself, Petyr took his small knives out and sharpened them where no one could see. He sent a letter down the mountain with a merchant who had come up with wool and left with stories. The letter was to a man in Gulltown who had once wanted to be more than he could be and had forgiven himself for failing. The letter asked him to remember how to count. He sent a purse to the sept at Old Anchor and a cask to a knight at Coldwater Burn who had known John Arryn's squire and had never forgiven King's Landing for anything. He spoke softly with Lady Anya 3 times and never mentioned Harry until she did. And when she did, he let a name sit between them like a warm stone, and then he added another. And when the names were 3, he smiled and stepped away so she could pretend she had arranged them herself. He came to Elaine's solar one late afternoon when the light had decided to make a miracle of everything it touched and made even old pewter look like a thing to be worshipped. He shut the door and leaned against it, and the mockingbird at his throat winked. "You have been good," he said, as if speaking to a falcon who had flown and come back when called. "I have been myself," she said, and he bestowed that soft praise upon her again as if he had rehearsed bestowing it and enjoyed it as much as delivering a clever speech in the hall. "We will set a date," he told her, without explaining the date, and she knew he meant the betrothal that would tie her to Harold Harding and the Vale to her and him to all of it, as neatly as a sailor ties a ship to a quay. Not in the first thaw. In the second, it will look less hungry. We will do it at the gates so that the climb does not kill half the guests. We will call it a little tourney to amuse a boy with shakings and to give another boy a field to strut in. We will invite the knights of the Vale. We will invite the knights of the Vale." He stopped and corrected himself, smiling. "We will invite the winged knights. They like to be called what they are in old songs. We will make a pageant of old songs and add you to it like a new verse. And the old men will protest, and the young ones will lean forward. And when the old men look around, they will find they are singing the new words. And if they do not sing?" she asked. "They will hum," he said. "It is enough." He came nearer and touched a lock of her hair and lifted it and let it fall. Harry looked left. "On the 4th pass," she said. "I arranged a 4th pass," Petyr told her, and she fought the urge to snatch up the fallen lock and tie it back and hide it from him. "I will arrange 100 4th passes for you. You must only ride them with me." "I ride for myself," she said, and made a small pleasure of the way his eyes softened at that, as if she had just played the note he likes most in a song he wrote. Marillion tried to sing himself into a different story that week. Elaine went down to him because she could not bear the knowledge of his voice moving above her head like a hawk with a broken wing and not go down to look at the feathers. He sat in his cell with his hands folded as if he were a man who had forgotten that hands can do anything but rest, and when he saw her he tried to stand, and his chains made a sound like a harp struck wrong. "I have a new song," he told her, eyes bright with the terrible clarity of men who have nothing left but the thing that made them hated. "It will please them. It says I lied. It says I lied because I was proud, and I wanted to make my name a bigger thing than my body. It says I could not push a bird through a sky." "That is a true song," she said. "It is," he agreed sadly. "But it is also false, because I did not lie for pride. I lied because the floor had turned to air, and I had to make it into something again, or fall with her. I lied because words make a floor for me. My lady," I saw his mouth at her ear. "He said something that made a person into a door. He said something that turned a woman into a step. I cannot make a song that says that without being made less again." "You must not sing that song," she said, and met his eyes, which were so full of reality it hurt to look. "If you sing that song, they will make your tongue into a thing that does not know how to say your name." "Names are not ours," he whispered, and smiled with a sweetness that broke her. "We only hold them for a while." She brought him a slice of cheese anyway, though it was mildewed at one edge, and she listened while he sang the safer lie, and tried to believe in the safety, and left him with the echo of a truth, shivering in the stones. The snow fell softly for 3 days, and then turned on the 4th to knives, and men walked with their heads down, and their shoulders up, and their mouths set, and the hall felt like a throat being cleared to say a difficult thing. Bronzeon spoke in the godswood then, because the hall felt too full of ears that liked to pretend they were deaf. He went with Lady Anya and Lothar Brun and Maester Coleman. And Elaine went because she had been asked, and because she could not help wanting to hear what the gods would say to old oak. The trees there are not the old kind, not the faces with eyes cut in them, not the white wood that remembers. There is a little stream that does not freeze because it is obstinate, and there are older stones set in a ring where the ground dips, and there is a feeling a man gets there that he is standing on a memory, even if he cannot say which. Bronzeon stood with his back to a beach and said, "By river and by rock and by runes, I am tired." He did not pray. He had done that elsewhere, earlier, or not at all. "Then sit," Lady Anya said. She was more direct than any rune. "The council will be made. The boy will be shown. The heir will be tangled to the girl. You can either take your name off the axe you dislike, or keep it under them, so that when the cloth tears you can say you held it. There is no third thing." Bronzeon's mouth twisted in that way men's mouths do when a woman tells them a truth they would rather have heard from a man. "There is always a third thing," he said obstinately. "There's the thing a man does alone. I could publish a letter to the Vale. I could ride to Runestone and call my banners and sit there and call it the heart of the Vale, and let the rest of you orbit me like stones around a mountain." "Now, you could," Anya agreed. "And a winter will pass, and then another. And in the third the boy will die, or he will not, and the heir will be grown, and will ride with the men who have been made by the rooms he was welcomed into. He will not have been welcome at Runestone, because you will have been too busy writing letters. He will be welcome at the gates. Do not be old in the stupid way, Jan. Be old in the useful way." "Is there a useful way?" he asked, and there was no mockery left in him, which made Elaine love him very hard. "There is always the useful way," Anya said, and touched his hand with her bare fingers, and did not take them away even when the cold bit them. "Men only do not like it because it looks like work and not glory." She turned to Elaine, and the sudden weight of that look startled. "I will say a thing to you I would not say to a foolish pretty girl. When he throws a rope across a ravine, you test it before you put your foot on it. You understand me?" "Memshwande." "I do," Elaine said, and heard how strange her own voice sounded in a place where breath made ghosts. "I do." A letter came down from the Erie on the back of the snow that week. It was from a kitchen girl who had grown into a woman with strong wrists and a head full of the tides of rooms. A woman who remembered Sansa Stark's face when the world changed color. The letter did not name the girl. It did not name Sansa. It spoke of winter stores, and of a chair that creaked, and of a leak in the roof near the rookery that made the maester swear. and of a pair of old shoes mended with a bit of dried fish skin, which was clever and smelled. It said, "Tell the Lord Protector the drift at the second landing has teeth." It said, "The men have been singing about a girl who climbed a mountain once carrying a lord's tears." It said, "I know you." It did not say, "I see you." It did not need to. Petyr read it and smiled and burned it. Elaine watched the flame take the bit about the fish skin last, and wondered if the gods took jokes slowly. The day for the winter pageant came uninvited and right on time. They called it a showing, not a tourney, because no man wanted to be thrown and take a fever on account of pride. There were tilts at half speed with blunted points, and there were rings hung on a line to be speared, and there was a snowman with a red scarf grown new from a retired sleeve that Harry must unseat with a wooden sword without killing it entirely. There were women wrapped in fur who made bright islands in the cold, and there were men who had put ribbons in their beards in an old Vale fashion that made boys laugh and then try it themselves in private. Lord Robert was brought down in a chair with little falcon wings that gave the women tears to dab at, and the men something to look at that was not their own frailty. He clapped with his thin hands and demanded sweets, and forgot them when Harry took the ring on the first try like a boy who had practiced in a warm yard. Elaine stood at the left again and let herself be looked at, and did not let herself be made into a mirror for boys. Harry rode as if he were an answer to a question men were afraid to ask. He missed twice and laughed each time as if laughing made missing into a trick he had meant to do. He fell once, and the snow applauded him, as he had promised it would, and he lay in it for a heartbeat, and then sprang up and bowed from the waist with snow in his hair and grace in his bones. He looked left only when the looking cost him nothing. That is a habit in boys and in men and in lords. Petyr walked through that day as if he were a host, which he was, and as if he were a father, which he was not, and as if he were a lord of the Vale, which he had made himself. He did not push, he guided. He did not direct, he suggested. He put Lord Belmore beside Lady Anya for one cup and beside Bronjean for the next, and watched them discover that they hated different things and might therefore stand together at times. He spoke to the men from Longbow Hall and praised their fox-red horses, and did not mention the foxes they hunted with them. He found a place for Sir Lynn where his laugh would do the least harm and the most good. When evening came, and the yard was churned to a kind of porridge by hooves and boots and children's foolishness, when men had drunk enough mulled wine to forget their old insults and remember their new promises, Petyr made a little speech that did not call itself a speech. He stood where the light fell kindly and lifted a cup, and named John Arryn, and named the winter, and named the old words, and named the boy's courage, and named the girl's presence as a blessing that had warmed the gates. He did not say betrothal. He did not say wedding. He let the cup sit and the names do their work, and the hall took them in and made of them a warmth that would last until men remembered to be cold again. After, in the small room where the ledger slept and the brazier hissed like a cat, he told her the date, 8 Mid-Lent. He said, using the old count, that the Vale still loved because it was older than any king and belonged to weather and men. We will call the Septon from 9 stars. We will send down to Gulltown for lace and up to the Eyrie for a cloak with little falcons cut into it. We will invite the mountain clans with a promise of salt and a promise of clean floors. No one will sweep after them. Ben, Lady Anya? She asked, because one woman's face was now the only mirror she trusted. She will consent, he said, because she sees the useful way, as she told Jan and the gods would, and because she loves Harry and does not love him foolishly, and because she loves hurting kings landing in any way that hurts only it. I would marry you to the moon if the moon would dawn in my power. As it will not, I will take Harold Harding. He smiled and let the humor cover something else, and Elaine saw the place where the smile's cloth did not reach. You will not tell me to smile. She said, suddenly weary. I will not, he said. Not now. Smile then when you stand under the lace with a wreath on your hair. and the Vale sings songs older than both of us. Smile that she did not cross that night. She lay and watched the candle go down and listened to the mountain, talking to itself in little flurries, and remembered how her father had trusted good men in rooms, and had died anyway, because the room had been a trap, and the good men had been busy with their own goodness. She thought of Bronze Yon and Lady Anya, and Lord Redford, and Lord Templeton, and Lord Belmore, and even Sir Lynn, who was a kind of virtue to himself. She thought of Petyr, and of how many rooms he could make at once, and how many ropes he could throw, and hold, and draw taut. In the morning, she put on blue. It was unkind to the men. They watched her with gratitude, which is a kind of pain. The council heard petitions of a sort that tasted of salt and old bread. A man who claimed his neighbor's goat had eating rights on a field where there had been a wall once, and the neighbor who claimed the wall was a lie. A girl who had married herself without acceptance, words to a boy who had gone down to Gulltown and come up again with nothing but a cough, and a master who claimed the girl as chattel, a knight who had lost 3 men to a fever and wanted to bury them, but returned. These were the things that made a winter and made a lord's worth, and made a council be worth more than any sword. Petyr adjudicated as if he had been born to the laws of the Vale. Bronze Yon watched and grunted sometimes, and nodded less often, and did not call the law a leash that hour, which meant the law was doing what it should. Harry came to the hall that day not to show but to sit with Lady Anya, and to learn how men sit when their names begin to have more bones in them. He kept his mouth shut with a heroism that would have made a good song. Once he caught Elaine's eye and let one corner of his mouth lift the smallest bit, as if sharing a secret about the absurdities of goats and men. She did not let her mouth move at all. The secret would cost too much. When the bells rang that evening, it was in a pattern that meant guests, serious ones, and the whole keep made a face. You can taste a new arrival in a winter hall. The air changes. The drafts misbehave. The men came in with the look of the river on them, not salt, but that damp that gets under wool and into talk. Their cloaks had a pin she did not know for a heartbeat, and then she remembered a thing she had been trying not to remember since the day she became Elaine Stone. A crowned stag, black on gold, but rubbed and dulled and wrapped in travel cloth, as if shame had learned to cover itself. A king's men, from a city that had learned to make kings like cakes, and then to eat them. They asked to be heard. They were heard. They said words and arranged them into a pattern meant to tame the Vale from a distance. They brought writs with a signature that looked like a boy's name dressed up, and a wax that had not been satisfyingly pressed. They said the hand commands. They said the Lord is a ward of the crown. They said the Lord Protector's appointment was provisional. They said the crown would appoint a new lord to sit in the eyrie and to mind the Vale's affairs until the boy grew or did not. They said a man from the city would be coming. All the cold in the mountains of the moon could not have made the hall colder. It was a perfect, clean cold, like the inside of a drop of water just before it freezes. Men's eyes went wide at the edges. Petyr's mouth went soft. Bronze Yon's runes looked darker, as if the old words had gathered themselves to be bigger. Lord Nestor took the writ with the careful respect a man gives to a piece of paper that can set other men on horses. He looked at it as if he could read more in the wax than in the words. Lord Redford counted with his eyes and found no coin in the document. Lord Templeton's mouth set, and it was very clear that he had no love of being told anything by anyone who did not know what winter was. Petyr did not speak at once. That was his cleverness. He let other men despise the messenger. He let other men hate the words. He waited until the hate had found the hall and filled it, and made it warm enough for him to step into without a cloak. Then he said, "We are grateful for the crown's attention," in a tone that made it clear the room was grateful for nothing. And he smiled with his mouth, and not his eyes. "We will show the crown how well the Vale keeps herself, and ask the crown to keep her hands warm at her own hearth." "Lord Protector," said the taller of the king's men, glancing at the mockingbird and then away, not recognizing it, as he did not recognize much. "This is not a request." "It is winter," Petyr said pleasantly. Everything is a request." He held out his hand, palm up. "Stay and warm yourselves. We will answer in the morning." The men of the city had not learned to hear that particular side of a man's voice. They bowed, clumsy with hauteur, and were led away to be given stew that would scald their tongues and beds that would make them ache and fires that would go out at 3 in the morning and make them swear that mountain men were savages who did not understand hospitality. They would be wrong. The Vale understood hospitality too well. It kept its warmth for itself when the sky could not be trusted to be gentle. When the doors were closed, when the servants had picked up the last spilled drop of wine, so no mouse could say the gates were slovenly, when the hall contained only the men who were bound to it, and the girl whose name it did not know, Bronze stood and spoke for the thing that was in every man's mouth now. "No," he said. The word fell like a stone into a frozen pool. Cracks ran out from it. Men watched the lines travel and did not move. "No," he said again. "To the crown, to the city, to the boy whose name was on the writ, to the notion that men in gilded rooms telling themselves stories make truth." He lifted his chin and put his hand flat upon the table, where so many hands had made a warmth. "John Aaron is dead," he said. "He is not your dead. He is ours. We will not be managed by a boy with a stag on his cloak, who has never ridden a mule path. We will set our counsel, and we will tie our leash, and we will bind our heir, and we will keep our boy alive as best we can. If a man comes up our mountain with a crown's letter in his hand, let him bring fat mules. He will need both." "Ben? You will make war," Lord Templeton said, not dissuading, asking the name of the thing. "We will make winter," Bronze said, "and let the city see if it can eat that." Petyr inclined his head, and there was a little light in his eye as if a puzzle he had been missing a piece for had just found it. "We will answer in the morning," he said, for form, but his voice said, "We have already answered, and it is no." When Elaine slept that night, she dreamed of the moon door again, but this time it was a letter that fell through it, and on the letter there was a name she did not say upon waking. She lay in the cold light and listened to Petyr's step in the corridor beyond, and to the mountain speaking, and to the mice in the wall writing their own writs, and she thought, "A rope can hold a boy and a hall and a veil, but a rope can be cut by a crown." She rose and dressed with her hair tight and plain, and went down to the hall where the council would put its marks upon the answer. When the king's men were brought in with their boots wiped, and their faces schooled, and their stomachs bravely pretending to be satisfied with porridge, they stood before a table where a parchment lay. Lord Nestor read it aloud in his slow voice that made a sentence into a path a man could walk without falling. It said what Bronze had said, and what Petyr had said more sweetly. It said what Lady Anya had implied, and what Elaine had understood, and what Harry had not read yet. It said the Vale keeps its own. It said, "We do not defy the crown. We love it from a distance." It said, "Come in summer when the roads are not death, and bring your best arguments, and we will hear them." It said, "Do not send boys." It said, "Do not send men who have never frozen." The messengers took it, because that was their duty, and left on the next thaw with mules that had been chosen not to go lame, because that was the gate's duty. The hall breathed. Men smiled, a little fierce. Women laughed in their sleeves and went to see about new lace. There was a night then that felt like reprieve. Miranda found Elaine and dragged her up a stair she had not climbed to a place between roof and sky, where the wind ran like a river through a tight channel, and the stars huddled close as if for warmth. They sat with their backs to a chimney that bled a small warmth, and looked at the black shapes of the peaks and the little far lights that marked men's lives in the valleys. "You will marry," Miranda said, not as a question but as a thing a girl says when she can say everything aloud and is allowed to be a little savage with it. "You will become a lady of the Vale and have a cloak that will never be old because a dozen women will keep it so all their lives, and then die and pass that work to their daughters. You will eat almonds every day until they make your tongue weary. And then something will happen that we have not guessed, and you will have to be brave." "I have been brave," Elaine said, and hated the whine she heard in the words. "You have been quiet," Miranda said, and then kissing her cheek as if to soften cruelty, added, "And that is a kind of bravery no one writes songs about. I love you for it, though I do not understand it. I was born to chatter and to love the taste of my own cleverness. You were born to measure out your words as if they were gold and to look at men as if they were hills, and you were planning where to put a road. Men shall. And you sound like a lord, Elaine said. I am one, Miranda said, laughing in the throat. At least a lord's daughter. An unimportant one, which is why I can say what I like. The important ones die of it. Now. Later, alone at her window with the shutter half set, Elaine watched a line of men with lanterns move like a string of stars along the wall walk. She could hear the ocean when the wind turned a certain way, or she thought she could. The far boom that is older than crowns and trials. She thought of Winterfell then, and let the thought come and sit, and did not push it away. She thought of a godswood with a face cut in a tree, and of a dead man's voice in a frozen courtyard, and she cried without noise until the lanterns had gone, and the wall walk was dark, and the mountain had no more to say. In the morning, there was more winter to be done. The gate at the Narrows had been set too low, and a laden cart had caught and spilled its load and broken an axle. Men argued whether axes or intelligence would fix such things, and in the end, it was intelligence wielding an axe that did. The clans had sent down a boy with a necklace of dead bees as a token, which meant something to them and nothing to the men of the gates. Maya had told them it meant the painted dogs were asking for a thing they had no right to ask for. Petyr weighed the boy's request and his necklace and Maya's explanation, and sent back a new pot with a line etched in it that would tell the woman with the needle that he understood things that men from cities did not. Harry came, as a boy will come to the place where the girl is, and practiced being a man in little ways that did no harm. He spoke to Lord Redford and did not make a fool of himself. He stood beside Bronze Jan without flinching and looked into the old man's eyes when he asked him where he had learned to put his knees that way, and said, "On paths," which was the right answer. He asked Elaine once, when no one could hear, what color lace she liked best, and she said, "The kind that does not scratch," and he laughed and then looked a little stricken, as if he had realized too late that lace scratches a great deal of a girl's life. The days turned like pages in a book the Vale had read before. They added men to the council, and took one away when he proved to like the sound of his own voice too much. They settled a dispute over a stream that had moved itself 3 feet. They sent a letter to the Septon at 9 Stars that had him preening himself in a mirror, and then setting out solemnly as if mirrors were for boys and he for God. They let the king's writ sit in a chest where the mice dared not gnaw for fear of being hauled before the council on a charge of treason. They made a list of foods for the wedding that did not include any fish that would have to be dragged up the mountain and be served smelling of travel. And all the while, the thing that had brought them into the hall together remained like a carved face at the end of a long nave. The question of a woman's fall. Men had forgotten it in their talking the way men forget to put a log on a small fire when they are discussing big ones. Bronze Jan did not forget. He waited until one afternoon when men were warm with their own competence, and the wind had softened like a woman who has said all she intends to say and is waiting to see whether anyone has listened. He stood and said, "We must finish what we began about Lysa." It took a long breath out of the hall. Petyr inclined his head as if a courtesy had been done him. The maester looked at his hands, as if for the measure he had remembered, and forgotten, and remembered again. Marillion was led up, thin as a string, to stand under the light that made his face a map of things men had done to him. Elaine stood without being told to, and set her hands at her sides, and counted again the planks under her feet that she had counted on the first day, as if they were the beads of a prayer that might save her. Bronze Jan did not make a speech. He did not love the sound of his voice the way some men love theirs. He asked a single question, and he asked it of every man in turn like a hammer falling on nails. "What did you see?" The maester. "A draft, a quarrel, a wind, a door, a woman with eyes that wanted not to see. Sir Lotor. A singer, a warning, a man doing what a man must when a woman moves where she should not. Sir Oswell. A ladder in a hall where no ladder should be, and a way to a window that should have been barred. Marillion. Words. Elaine Windy. Words," Bronze Jan said, when the singer faltered into silence. He let the word hang there as if it were itself a door. What words? Marillion closed his eyes and opened them, and the look in them made Elaine want to put her fingers in her ears like a girl. He said, the singer whispered, "Make a door of this, sweetling." His mouth moved and made the phrase again without sound. He said. He tried. "The air is kinder than stone," he said. He said anything that will sit in your breath and sound like the sound you have had to live in. Petyr said, not unkindly, as if he were soothing a child in pain. He said nothing at all. He said her name, perhaps, because it is what one says when one does not know what else to say. He did not make a door of a woman. He tried to make a wall of her, and the wall would not hold. Many now. Elaine's own mouth moved without her permission, and made the words the singer had said aloud, and made the words Petyr had answered. The room tilted. The moon door opened in her head and shut again, and left her shaking. Bronzion watched all this and put none of it on his face. "We cannot know," he said at last, and the admission cost him more than any oath. "We cannot know what a mouth said, and what a woman heard, and what a wind did. We are left with a man we do not like, and a singer who has been remade into another kind of liar, and a girl who learned not to speak. We are left with a boy. We are left with a veil. Now." He turned his head and looked at Petyr. "We will not say you murdered Lysa Arryn," he said. And each word was a rung placed on a wall so a man could climb down from his own pride without falling. "We will not say you did not. We will say only that the veil has had enough of death by doors. We will say only that if you push anything through any door in the veil henceforth, without the council's leave, you will find yourself standing on a very small stone in a very big wind." Nani. Petyr bowed as if he had been given a wreath. "I have no taste left for doors," he said. "Only for tables." "Tables," Lord Templeton said dryly, and put his mark to the parchment that declared the leash a law now, and the council a body, and the trial a thing that had been Winter's work. Lord Redfort signed also. As if each letter were a sword stroke he was practicing. Lord Belmore took the quill and made a flourish that looked like vanity, and hid an honest pride in being counted among those who counted. Lady Anya took the quill in turn and made her name like a seam that held two pieces of cloth together and kept a wind out. Bronzion put his name there last, as if he had been waiting for the others to hold the parchment down, so that when he wrote, he would not tear it. Elaine watched the ink shine and dry. She felt the hull shift ever so slightly, like a ship that has taken on a kind of ballast. She let herself exhale. She had not known she had been holding her breath for a season. Outside the wind changed. It came up from the south for an afternoon and brought with it the smell of old leaves and distant fires and the taste of the sea's patience. Men unbent. Women smiled and did not hide it under their hoods. Harry ran with two other boys and fell and let them see him laugh again. Lord Robert slept without shaking for 2 hours and woke and asked for a story and did not remember a single crown. Petyr came to Elaine and stood beside her at the window, where the change in the wind could be felt on the teeth. He did not tell her to smile. He did not touch her hair. He only put his hand on the window frame where hers already lay. So close the bones of their fingers spoke to one another like strangers at a supper table, who have just discovered they know the same psalm. "We have made a winter," he said, low, half pleased, half wary. "We have made a cloth," she answered, thinking of the loom she had imagined that day in the hall. "It will not keep out every cold." "It will keep out enough," he said. "For now." "For now," she echoed, and refused herself the comfort of the words. "For now" is the cruelest pledge the world keeps best. At mid-Lent, the Septon from 9 Stars came up with his books wrapped in oilcloth, and his belly wrapped in wool and his mouth full of God. The council met him and gave him the best place at the high table, and he ate as if he had been told to set an example of appetite. He looked upon Elaine and did not see a girl who had lain under a city and learned how to be. The old women brought out wreaths of dried herbs that had somehow not lost their scent over winter, and the girls dressed in their second best because the first best would be saved for a summer that might not come, and the men put ribbons on their sword hilts and pretended to laugh at themselves for doing it. Harry stood in a cloak the green of new grass that no winter had yet known, and was prettier than he ought to have been. He did not look, only left. When the vows were spoken, they were not marriage vows yet. Petyr had made a new old way. He had learned enough from Bronze Jan to know that men will swallow a new thing if it tastes at first like the bread their grandfathers ate. The Septon blessed a promise to promise. He blessed the boy's spear hand and the girl's fruitfulness, and everyone's patience, and God's will. He did not bless Petyr. He did not need to. As the hall rose in applause measured for something that was very serious and very pretty and very useful, Bronze Jan caught Elaine's eye and did something she had never seen him do. He smiled at her, not with politeness, not with weary acceptance, but with the fierce, brief smile of a man who sees that a hard thing has been shouldered by someone who might bear it. It lit his face and then went. But it stayed in her, the way lights stay on the inside of your eyelids when you have looked too hard at a fire. After, when the girls took her away to laugh and to comb and to ask whether lace scratches, she let herself laugh too, and let the lace scratch, and let the comb pull, and did not cry. She looked once at Petyr across the room and saw him smiling a smile that had 3 meanings in it, and all of them true. And then she looked away and found Harry's mouth, and told him something that made him blush and behave better. The mountains stood outside the windows, unmoved by vows and leashes and letters. The Eyrie was a pale scar in the blue again. The wind had changed and would change again. Men would come with crowns in their mouths and demands in their hands, and the Vale would answer with winter or with bread, as need be. The trial had not ended so much as become the floor on which they stood. That night, when the candles had guttered and the mice had reminded themselves of their responsibilities, and the last horn had sounded on the wall walk, Elaine lay in the dark and named herself. She did it silently, and she did it twice, and she did it as if she were writing in snow with her finger. She named the girl she had been, and the girl she was, and the woman she would have to become, and the woman she would never forgive. And then, as sleep at last came, she named the Vale, and named the mountain, and named the wind, and made herself a place among them, as if she had been born into this and had never walked another floor.